She's a federal judge, a socially conservative Catholic, and she describes the ideal Supreme Court justice as
someone who applies the law, who follows the law where it goes, and doesn't decide simply on the basis of partisan preference.
If Amy Coney Barrett, Trump's Supreme Court nominee, replaces Ruth Bader Ginsburg, conservatives will solidify a 6-3 majority on the high court. So, is she the conservative judge Trump promised to deliver to his base? We might be able to learn a little bit about the potential future of the Supreme Court by looking into Barrett's past. Where does she stand on issues like abortion, healthcare, and LGBTQ rights? But first, Barrett is a mom of 7, New Orleans native, and at 48 years old, she'd be the youngest justice on the Supreme Court. She graduated summa cum laude from Notre Dame Law School and has been teaching there since 2002. Barrett was named Professor of the Year more than once.
What you say reflects who you are and what you believe.
She clerked under the late Justice Antonin Scalia and shares his originalist approach to law, interpreting the Constitution strictly as it was written. And this isn't her first time on the SCOTUS shortlist. President Trump considered her a couple of years ago for the vacancy now filled by Justice Brett Kavanaugh. During her 3 years serving on the bench at Chicago's 7th Circuit Court of Appeals,
she heard requests for appeals in 2 cases related to state abortion regulations.
Once in 2018 and once in 2019.
She came down against abortion rights in both.
But in a 3rd case, she took a different stance, expressing support for a Chicago law that barred anti-abortion demonstrators from approaching patients outside abortion clinics. When it comes to Roe v. Wade, it seems like she sees it as settled law.
I don't think the core case, the Roe's core holding that, women have a right to an abortion, I don't think that would change. But I think the question of whether people can get very late-term abortions, how many restrictions can be put on clinics, I think that would change.
And in a 2013 discussion reported on by the Notre Dame student paper, Barrett is quoted as saying, "The controversy right now is about funding. It's a question of whether abortions will be publicly or privately funded."
In terms of her personal beliefs, Barrett told Notre Dame magazine she believes life begins at conception. She was also a member of Faculty for Life, an anti-abortion group at Notre Dame. Her Catholic faith became a focal point of her confirmation hearing to the federal bench in 2017.
The conclusion one draws is that the dogma lives loudly within you.
Lawmakers also brought up a controversial article she wrote in law school, arguing Catholic judges should recuse themselves from some death penalty cases due to conflicting morals.
I can't think of any cases or category of cases in which I would feel obliged to recuse on grounds of conscience.
She was ultimately confirmed in a 55-43 vote, with 3 Democrats voting in her favor. Some have pointed to her reported affiliation with the charismatic Christian community People of Praise as a cause for concern. Until recently, female advisors in the group were reportedly referred to as handmaids. Barrett has not confirmed her membership to the group. But Barrett has repeatedly insisted her personal views on abortion, religion, or any issue for that matter would not influence her decisions as a jurist.
If you're asking whether I take my faith seriously, and I'm a faithful Catholic, I am, although I would stress that my personal church affiliation or my religious belief would not bear on the discharge of my duties as a judge.
If Barrett joins the highest court in the land, there are other things that could be more vulnerable than Roe v. Wade, like Obamacare. She's been critical of the Affordable Care Act because it required employers to cover birth control. Barrett also took issue with how much power Congress has been given to enforce it. If confirmed, she could potentially weigh in on a 3rd challenge to the Affordable Care Act that's heading to the Supreme Court just 1 week after the election.
In the lead up to what is sure to be a contentious confirmation hearing, different narratives are beginning to emerge as to the kind of justice Barrett might be.
The Human Rights Campaign says she's an absolute threat to LGBTQ rights for defending the dissenting justices in Obergefell versus Hodges, the landmark case that ruled in favor of same-sex marriage.
But Barrett has insisted she'll follow Supreme Court precedent,
at least on the federal bench.
In the context of same-sex marriage, as in any context, my religious beliefs really would not bear on that at all.
Her colleagues at Notre Dame say she's not the far-right ideologue some Democrats are making her out to be. They describe her as, quote, an intelligent, thoughtful, open-minded person. A reliable conservative like Barrett replacing a fierce liberal like Ginsburg marks a huge ideological shift for the Supreme Court. Some legal experts think Barrett could be the third strongest conservative on the bench behind Alito and Thomas. But before that happens, both political parties are about to seize on Barrett's confirmation fight as an opportunity to energize their bases ahead of the election.
Mike, we know that Joe Biden took a break from those debate preps to weigh in on Judge Amy Coney Barrett's nomination. Here's what he said about that.
The Senate has to stand strong for our democracy. They must not act on this nomination until the American people finish the process they're already begun of selecting their president and their Congress. If the people do not choose Trump and choose me, President Trump's nomination should be withdrawn. I should nominate.
Mike, Republicans basically already have the votes to confirm her. We know Kamala Harris is in North Carolina talking about this today. So how is the Biden-Harris campaign talking about the Supreme Court pick with voters if there isn't all that much Democrats can do?
Yeah, I think what you saw there from the former vice president yesterday in Delaware is, yeah, speaking perhaps not to the Republicans on the Hill who control the fate of this nomination. That much is pretty much, without a doubt, going to move forward at this point. But trying to speak to the sensibilities of swing voters, people who just, are interested in fairness here. And that's sort of the target audience that the former vice president has been focused on recently. We heard a different tack slightly today from Kamala Harris, who just finished up in the last 20 minutes or so a speech directly on this subject matter, on the Supreme Court battle. She told the voters she was speaking to that we have to vote this fall like our right to vote is on the line. She talked about the the Holder versus Shelby County decision, which really gutted the Voting Rights Act, and talked about the decisions that Amy Coney Barrett herself has levied on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals that put that voting rights also at risk. And then, of course, across the board, we've heard both of them talking and linking this fight to the battle over the Affordable Care Act, which, of course, the Supreme Court is scheduled to hear in November. That's one of the reasons why Republicans are really in a rush to try to confirm Ms. Barrett, because they want her seated on the court in time to hear that case so she can be part of what they hope would be a majority to throw out President Obama's signature health care law. And so this is certainly an issue that Republicans, as we talk about the battle over the courts, have always felt energizes their base more than Democrats. But we're also seeing in this cycle, especially because of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the real icon that she was for a lot of Democrats, it's also firing up Democrats as well. And so that's what we saw Senator Harris really speaking to in North Carolina today.
All right, we'll see how that plays out on the debate stage tomorrow as well. Mike Memoli in Cleveland, where all the action's happening tomorrow night. Thank you so much.
That's right. Thanks, Alison.
Are we going to reelect Donald Trump? In suburban Milwaukee, Trump campaign volunteers are getting literal marching orders to go door knocking during a pandemic.
The number one way to change a vote is a door knock from a neighbor or a friend. If you don't want somebody to knock your door, you don't have to answer it.
Volunteer Christina Nelson will put on a mask if asked. No one does.
I feel fine with you being here.
The Trump campaign claims it's knocking on 1 million doors a month. The Biden campaign, deliberately 0. It's a stunning reversal from the ground game gold standard set by Barack Obama. So successful, Republicans require campaign staff to read a book about it. But Biden's campaign is making an unprecedented high-stakes gamble on an almost totally digital field operation.
Chris, you're living your life in a very, very different way. Your viewers are living their lives in a very different way. And so we're meeting that moment, and we're meeting people where they are.
Which means blasting voters with emails, videos, and apps.
Joe Biden has a plan to build back better.
And betting volunteers like Denise Calloway can be just as persuasive by calling and texting voters.
I think people are used to it now, having people reach out to them virtually.
Even the Biden Supply Center for yard signs, stickers, and buttons is a contactless drive-up. Both campaigns consistent with their candidate. Huge rallies versus intimate gatherings, footsteps and door knocks versus smartphones and Zoom calls. With the critical unanswered question, which strategy will work best?
How are you voting in the 2020 presidential election? Time is winding down, and NBC News can help you figure it out. We have a new state-by-state guide. It's called Plan Your Vote. It has information on voting rules, deadlines, and restrictions by state. Check it out at nbcnews.com/planyourvote.